I'm alone. Despite the voices I heard last night, I have to remember that I am alone. The storm raged around me, whipping the sea into a frenzy. The storm wasn't the worst I had seen, but it was truly the most terrifying. The icy spray lashed my face and stung my eyes, so I retreated below deck for shelter. The small craft rocked and swayed, but last night I swore there were voices out in the crashing waves. I ran back out into the storm, squinting into the darkness, but could see nothing except the foam-capped waves rising like liquid mountains. I am no stranger to the ocean. I've been in storms much worse than this, but there were always other crew to help or save you from going overboard. Now I longed for the comforting presence of crewmates. Each man in my family has gone solo across the ocean at least once. The isolation and terror meant to break a person in this rite of passage. I've both anticipated and dreaded this trip for the past few years. The whole time I've been out here, alone on the water, my body has been tense. My eyes are sore from the lack of sleep and the salty air. I can't get the thought out of my head. If anything goes wrong, I'm all on my own. My uncle was a deep-sea fisherman and traveled all over the world. When I was a boy, I could tag along on shorter trips, where he taught me all about boating. As I got older, I became a permanent member of his crew. In the still of the ocean night, far from any coastline, he would speak in hushed tones about the eerie happenings he had encountered. When you go really far out, where you are at the point in that ocean that is farthest from land, there is a strangeness in the air. It doesn't feel like a safe place at all. It gets my hackles all up. We passed through a bank of fog there once. You couldn't see more than a foot. We finally break through the mist and something feels off about one of the crew members. Turns out none of us remember picking him up at port, but he somehow seems familiar and we all know his name. The captain and the crew argue with me, insisting that they will vouch for the new crewman. The crew continues to work through the month. The strange crewman fits in and works hard. To this day, I would swear in court we picked him up in the fog. I shivered, imagining that phantom sailor. It reminds me of how alone I am in the middle of the ocean. The story goes on that the man got off at the next port and they never saw him again. So, we come back to that same port the next year and it is empty. A ghost town. Half the houses are burned down and the whole village looks like no one has lived there for decades. 50 years of rot happened overnight. My mind thinks back to the night I watched him tell me that story. The Milky Way was right in the middle of the sky. It was so bright, reflecting off of the glassy water, that I could see his face, so full of fear and regret. My uncle blamed himself for unleashing the monster on that unsuspecting town. The storm continued on. I wake up the next morning to grayness all around. The ocean is calm. Stumbling topside, I find visibility is barely 20 feet. This sinister, otherworldly cloud has surrounded the boat and appears to go on forever. I turn and see a figure in the mist walking towards me. I almost jump out of my skin, but then I see that it is just Thomas. I'm grateful that Thomas is out here with me. I don't think that I would be able to make it alone. Wait, something doesn't feel right. I reach through the molasses of my brain and try to grab a hold of that recent memory. It slips through. Instead, Thomas asks me to help fix up some breakfast. I follow him into the kitchen, where I can now see Thomas clearly. I see a man I've known my whole life, but his face, I can't place his face. Wait, do I have any memories of him? Thomas tosses me an onion and asks me to cut it up for the steak and eggs. I see flashes of my youth, my school years, working on other crews, searching for something involving Thomas. Nothing. I do not recognize this person who feels like a brother to me. My eyes sting from the onion fumes, and suddenly my uncle's story comes to mind. I look at the knife in my hand, a basic cutting knife that I had just sharpened 3 nights ago. Thomas is turned, prepping the hot plate to cook the steak. I take the knife and plunge it into the back of the creature's head. It drops to the floor. I stare at it for several hours, watching its disguise melt away as the pheromone chemicals wear off, revealing a misshapen mass of writhing tentacles. I try to decide whether to push the body back into the ocean or if the dead body should stay on my boat for now. I look out the window. The fog is still thick, and I notice the voices have begun again. They are closer this time and growing louder, calling for Thomas. Their kin was dead, and I was utterly alone.